Most people who are thinking about downsizing have already done a version of this math in their heads. Sell the big house, buy something smaller, pocket the difference, and life gets a lot easier. Now, here's what the math almost always gets wrong. The number in your head is based on the sale price of your home minus the purchase price of your next place. And what's not in that calculation is commission, Ontario land transfer tax, legal fees on two separate transactions. The cost of getting your home ready in today's market, and the monthly cost of wherever you end up. So by the time those numbers all land, the equity you thought you were freeing up is often $50,000 to $70,000 smaller than you expected. And the monthly cost of your next chapter is almost always higher than people plan for. Nobody shows you this math up front. And that's what I'm going to show you today. I'm going to walk you through what downsizing actually costs in this market with real verified numbers, so that if you're considering this move, you go into it clear-eyed and prepared. And that's what I want for you. Not surprised mid-process when it's already too late and not easy to change. And by the end of this video, you're going to know exactly what to expect on the sales side, exactly what hits on the purchase side here in Ontario, and what the monthly cost for the most common retirement destinations actually looks like right now. And you're going to know how to run these numbers for your own situation before you commit to anything. Now, this information does exist, but nobody in this market has laid it all out in one place, specifically for people in your situation who are downsizing. So that's what we're going to do today. I work with empty nesters, retirees, and seniors in Guelph, Kitchener, Waterloo, and the Cambridge surrounding areas, and people navigating exactly this type of move. Not a first home purchase, not a flip, a move that needs to work financially and emotionally, and that needs to be right for the long term. And what I see consistently is that people who struggle most with this transition, I should say, are the ones who started without a complete financial picture. And the ones who move through it with the least stress are the ones who did the homework first, before listing day, before making an offer on that next place. So the approach I use with every client, what I call your vision step of your next chapter, starts exactly here with the complete numbers, because you can't make a good plan without them. So let's build that picture together. Let me put a real scenario on the table so you can see exactly what I mean. Imagine this, a scenario where somebody sells a family home here in Guelph for KWR, $750,000, and buys a condo for $500,000. On the surface, that looks like $250,000 in equity being freed up. And that's the number most people picture. That's the number they bring into the conversations with their financial planner. Here's what actually happens to that $250,000. Real estate commissions on the sale comes off the top first. Land transfer tax on the $500,000 condo purchase at $6,475. And I'll show you exactly how that's calculated in a minute. Legal fees on both the sale and the purchase, approximately $2,500 combined. Preparation costs on the family home to get the market ready. These vary, but they're real, and moving costs on top of that. So add those up, and the friction costs of this move, just the cost of completing the two transactions and getting from one home to the next, lands somewhere in the $55,000 to $65,000, depending on your specific situation. That $250,000 in equity becomes roughly $185,000 to $195,000 in actual net proceeds. So that's still significant money, but it is meaningfully different conversation. So let's go through each cost in detail, starting with the sales side. The largest single cost is the real estate commission here in Ontario, and that the conventional commission ranges between 4% and 5% on a sale price. And the way that money moves is probably not what you'd expect. That commission is split between two brokerages: the listing brokerage that represents you as the seller, and the buyer's brokerage that represents the person buying your home. Now, each brokerage then pays their own salesperson from their portion. So the agent representing you doesn't pocket the full commission. The brokerage takes their split first. Then income tax still needs to come out of whatever's left, because real estate agents are self-employed. I'm self-employed. Unlike a regular salary job, No taxes withheld automatically. And the agent pays their own taxes at the end of the year, which is really significant cost of doing business that most people don't factor in when they see that large commission number. It might seem high, and I get it. I understand that reaction. Today's real estate transaction, though, is fundamentally more complex than it was 15 or 20 years ago. We live in a more litigious environment because buyers and sellers now have access to enormous amounts of information through Google, AI, and lots of other sources. And what that means is higher expectations, more scrutiny, and more accountability at every step. The contracts are more complex these days. The conditions involved are more detailed. The whole process requires more rigor and more expertise than it did a generation ago. And the cost structure actually reflects that. And here's the other important thing to understand about commissions. It comes out of your sale proceeds only. When you move into a condo as a buyer, on the other side of this transaction, you don't pay commission. Here in Ontario, all commission, including the portion that goes to the buyer's agent's brokerage, is paid entirely by the seller. As a buyer, there is no commission coming out of your pocket. On the math, commission at 4 to 5% on 700,000 is 30,000 to 37,500 before tax. Add HST applies to that real estate commission. As I always like to say, the government wants their share. So at 4%, 30,000 plus 3,900 HST is 33,900. 5%, 37,500 plus HST becomes 42,375. So that's the real number to put in your plan. There is one genuinely important piece of good news on the sales side, and I want to make sure that you know it. Here in Canada, the sale of your principal residence is sheltered from capital gains tax through the principal residence exemption, or the PRE for short. If this home has been your primary residence, you won't owe any tax on the gain when you sell. And that's a significant advantage that doesn't exist the same way south of the border. And it's one of the core reasons family homes is the central to retirement planning here in Canada. But the exemption covers the capital gain, not the transaction costs, commissions, legal fees, preparation costs. Those you pay regardless. Now, legal fees on the sale. You need a real estate lawyer to handle the title transfer, discharge existing mortgage, and make sure everything closes properly. In Ontario, legal fees for a standard residential sale are generally in the $1,500 to $2,500 plus disbursements. This is a general estimate, and your lawyer will give you the exact numbers, and that's for buy and sell. Now let's talk about preparing your home for sale, because this is the piece that matters more in today's market than it ever has. Staging, which is furniture, art, accessories that make a show its best, is typically organized and paid for by your realtor as part of their cost of marketing your property. So you don't pay separately for staging. What you do invest in is the physical condition of your home itself. Here's what that investment matters so much now. The buyer looking at homes in, let's say, 700,000 to 800,000 range are buying a mortgage payment. That's the reality of today's market. On a $750,000 home, a 15% down payment is like $112,000. 20% is $150,000 down payment. So that's a significant amount of capital tied up at closing. And after committing that much down payment, most buyers don't have the 10 or 15,000 sitting free for renovations. So here's what happens instead. A buyer will pay $200 or $300 more a month in mortgage payment for a home that's genuinely ready to move into, rather than buying one that needs work. In the buyer's mind, they are actually paying for the renovations. They're just financing a house that already has them. The seller who invested in proper preparation gets that money back in the sale price. The one who didn't essentially transfer the renovation bill to the buyer at a discount. And experience tells me buyers discount heavily. A 5,000 reno will estimated worst case scenario at 7,000 or more. What preparation looks like varies by home, but paint is one of the highest return things you can do. Fresh, neutral paint throughout transforms a home, photographs really well, and how buyers feel when they walk in. And flooring matters too. Minor repairs to anything a home inspector will flag matter a great deal because every deficiency on an inspection report is a reason a buyer will negotiate the price down. And the goal is to arrive at a market with the fewest objections possible. And once your home is prepared, the price is everything. This is one of the most important and most often misunderstood parts of the whole process. Strategic pricing is not about what you want for your home, it's what the buyer is willing to pay for your home. Let me say that again. Strategic pricing is not about what you want for your home, it's about what the buyer is willing to pay for your home. And those two numbers are not always the same, I've found out. But the data consistently shows that overpriced homes take longer to sell and go through more price reduction. So here's the mechanism. When your home is listed above market value, it gets compared to homes in that higher price bracket. Homes that for the same money offer more square footage, more bedrooms, better finishes, or maybe it's newer builds. Your home doesn't look like the value in that comparison. It looks like the outlier. Meanwhile, the buyers who would genuinely want your home at the right price never see it because at your listed price, it sits outside their approved budget. And the buyer who is the right fit and your home actually never meet. It's a mismatch, and mismatches are costly and expensive. Overpriced homes almost always sell for less than they would have if they were priced correctly from the start. The delays, the reductions, the reduced urgency among buyers, all of it works against you as the seller. So the right price is a disciplined calculation based on what comparable homes have actually sold for recently in your specific area. Not what a neighbor listed at, not what the market was doing 4 years ago, what buyers are actually paying this month for homes like yours. Now, let's talk about the purchase side, and specifically the Ontario Land Transfer Tax, or LTT, which is consistently the biggest surprise for people who haven't bought a property in a while. When you buy a property in Ontario, you pay provincial tax based on the purchase price, the LTT. It's calculated on a sliding scale across several tiers. So here is exactly how the math works on a $500,000 condo purchase. The province charges 0.5% on the first $55,000. That's $270. 1% on the portion from $55,000 to $250,000, another $1,950. Then 1.5% on the portion from $250,000 to $400,000, that's another $2,250. Then 2% on everything above $400,000. So on a $500,000 purchase, that final tier adds $2,000. And I know it's complicated. So those four tiers, $275 plus $1,950 plus $2,250 plus $2,000, your LTT on a $500,000 condo is $6,475. Now I hear this question regularly. Is there any rebate or relief for seniors or downsizers? The short answer is no. The LTT, there is no rebate here in Ontario. It only applies to first-time home buyers who get $4,000. So if you've owned a home before, you don't qualify. The rebate exists specifically for people buying their first property. Downsizers, repeat buyers, retirees, not eligible. So your LTT is a full unrebated cost and it increases at a higher price. So $750,000 ends up being $11,500. I calculated these figures from Ontario's published rate schedule, and your real estate lawyer will confirm the exact amount at closing. So one more thing worth knowing about the LTT. If you're buying in Toronto, the cost roughly doubles. Toronto charges its own land transfer tax on top of the provincial one, using a similar rate structure. So on $500,000 purchase, you'd be looking approximately $12,000 or more in combined LTT provincial plus the municipal. And if you or your adult children are buying anywhere in the city of Toronto, this is an important number to be aware of because it can be a shock. And the exact Toronto LTT calculation should be confirmed with a lawyer. But the key point is it's approximately double what the provincial amount is on top of it. And the LTT, you have legal fees on the purchase side as well, the same range as a sale, $1,500 to $2,500 plus disbursements. And then moving costs, one thing that's worth knowing here, when you're budgeting Movers, think carefully about how many movers you hire. If you go with 2 movers to save on the hourly rate, the move takes significantly longer. Hiring 3 or 4 movers costs more per hour, I get it, but the overall job is done considerably less time, making total costs less, not more. And there's another benefit too. Movers who aren't exhausted by, let's say, 8 hours of a long moving day are much less likely to damage your belongings and much more likely to take care throughout the whole job. So it's worth thinking about, definitely. And here's one more layer that matters for anyone making this move in the KW and Guelph area. Condo prices in this market have softened meaningfully from their peak. The average condo price in KW region is about $426,000 in 2025. That's almost 10% year over year down. In one sense, that's good news for downsizers buying into the condo market. You're potentially entering a lower price point than you were 2 or 3 years ago. Single detached homes are basically flat. There's a gain between the sell and the buy if you're downsizing. But softer condo prices don't change the LTT math, they don't eliminate commission, and if the detached home market in your neighborhood has also shifted from its peak, the equity available from your sale might be different from what you've been expecting. So base your plan on today's real numbers, a current market analysis on your home, and what your destination costs are right now, not at the peak today. Now, here's the piece I think is even more important than the transaction costs, and the one that gets talked about the least: the monthly cost of wherever you're going. If you're moving into a condo here in this area or anywhere, a matter of fact, you'll have monthly condo fees. These vary considerably by building. A newer condo might have fees as low as $250 a month. Older buildings with more amenities or buildings where reserve fund hasn't been managed well can run $700 to $900 or higher. That reserve fund piece matters a lot. A building with an underfunded reserve is a building that's more likely to hit you with a special assessment down the road. And you'll also still have property taxes, which will likely be lower than your current home, but they don't ever go away. Then there's the retirement home question. This is the number one. This is actually the number that stops people cold when they actually look it up. According to the 2026 guide published by Care Patrol Ontario, the average monthly cost of a retirement home here in Ontario is around $4,000 per month. That's $48,000 a year. Not a luxury facility, that's Ontario average. So think about that, what that means in the context of the equity you're freeing up. If you net $190,000 after transaction costs, the equity covers roughly 4 years of retirement home costs at today's Ontario average. But here's an important distinction: that $190,000 doesn't have to just sit there being drawn down as spending. Invested wisely with guidance from a financial planner, it can generate income through an annuity or other investment products. The goal here is to put it to work, not just spend it. A financial planner who understands your full picture is the right person to help direct those funds. And I want to be clear about something. I'm not saying retirement homes are the wrong choice. For many families, they're absolutely the right choice, and the care and community they provide is genuinely valuable. What I am saying is that the monthly cost of your next chapter needs to be understood clearly before you decide. If that number doesn't fit your long-term income plan, the equity from the sale won't cover the gap for as long as you're hoping. And I don't want that for you. So the story most people tell themselves about downsizing is, well, we'll sell the house, put the equity in savings, and that will fund our retirement. The reality is that equity is almost always less than the first estimate, and the monthly cost of the next chapter is almost always more than people initially projected. So those two gaps together are where the surprise comes from. So what do you actually do with all of this? Well, here's the framework I'd walk through before making any commitments. Start with the destination, not the sale. Most people begin by thinking about what their home is worth and work forward from there. Flip that around. Start by getting crystal clear on exactly where you want to go. Is that a condo or a bungalow? Maybe an adult lifestyle community or a retirement residence. Next, get the actual numbers on what it costs to move in and what you'll pay every month once you're there. If the monthly cost of your next chapter doesn't fit your income and your savings plan, no amount of equity from the sale is going to make it sustainable for the long term for you. Then run the complete transaction cost picture. Take a realistic current estimate of what your home would sell for today, not the peak number, today's number. And subtract commission at 4 to 5% plus HST. Subtract the LTT on your purchase. Subtract legal fees on both sides. And subtract preparation and moving. And what you're left with is your real net. That's the number your financial planning conversations need to be built around. And then ask what equity needs to do and for how long. This is the conversation for your financial planner, not for me. I'm not a financial advisor, and that's genuinely not my lane. But knowing the accurate net from the real estate transaction gives your planner something real to work with versus a headline number that turns out to be maybe $50,000 or $60,000 more optimistic than reality. The mistake I see most often is people walking into financial planning conversations with the surface math. I sell for 750, I buy for 500,000, pocket 250. They believe they are building a retirement plan around that number. Then the closing statement arrives and the actual net is $60,000 less than expected. That's not a small variance. Go in with a real number. It really makes everything downstream far more accurate for you. And staying in a larger family home you're no longer fully using doesn't serve most people well long term. The maintenance costs, the physical demands are only going to increase over time. I've seen this with past clients. What they could do before changes over time and often due to health or physical issues. So downsizing usually makes sense in that situation. But the version of this story that gets told, downsizing automatically frees up a large sum, makes everything simpler, is an incomplete story. The transaction costs are real and significant, and the monthly costs of the destination are real and significant. The equity you free up is almost always less than the first estimate, and the monthly cost of your next chapter is almost more than what people first projected. So going into this with an accurate, a complete picture doesn't make the decision harder. In my experience, it actually makes it easier because you're not managing a surprise mid-process. You're making a real plan based on what's actually true for your actual situation in your actual market. And a plan grounded in reality is the one that leads to the next chapter actually going well for you.